All right, well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. And we have a bunch of great folks here. And I think for my presentation, rather than, you're going to hear all sorts of ideas of how people are handling AI around a bunch of topics today. And so I think for my presentation, I just really wanted to kind of frame the day, set up the day. I'm going to create probably more questions that I think other people will provide some answers to later. But I started this presentation as 10-ish charts in 10 minutes. Kind of turned into like 20-ish charts in 15 to 20 minutes. But I'll go through this quickly. And this is a bunch of stuff that I've been tracking and thinking about. And I'm actually here to get other people's opinions on today as well. And I think will reflect a lot of people. So I think we're all here today because AI is kind of touching every single thing that we do as professionals, from product strategy to the tools that we adopt to what we're doing with our team to how we run our product development process and how we build products. And so I'm going to go through each one of these and show some metrics and charts and stats that I've been tracking a little bit that kind of create some of the common narratives, but also question a lot of the narratives as well. I want to start with strategy. And when I think about strategy, 10 years ago, I wrote an article called The Four Fits. It's just the way that I personally think about it, where it's about how do we combine market, product, channel, and model into one cohesive system. Everybody knows product market fit. Product channel fit is about how we mold our product to take advantage of channels. Channel model fit is more about how does our model enable or disable certain acquisition channels we offer, and then how does our model and our market fit to create a really big business. I think everybody knows on the market side of things that AI is massively expanding some markets like software development, also collapsing some markets like seat-based customer service. And so I'm going to focus more on my time on the three other boxes, product, channel, and model, because I think there's some really interesting data that's coming out about it. Starting with product, of course, the thing that I've been tracking is AI capabilities are still doubling every 7 months, right? And this creates a lot of questions around product strategy, which is how do I build, ahead of this curve? When it is doubling every 7 months, it starts to feel like, I got to reinvent core capabilities within my product. It starts to put a lot of questions of how do we actually start to construct a product strategy when these things are changing. Now, it'll be a question like, does this hit some form of diminishing returns like self-driving did for a little bit? But from right now, we're still on this trajectory according to all of the people that are tracking it, and it creates a lot of questions. A lot of which I think Robbie in our next presentation has been thinking a lot about how do you build durable, differentiated products when things are doubling every 7 months. In addition to that, Casey, who will speak later today, wrote an excellent article a couple of years ago about when we get technology shifts, we often or sometimes get platform and distribution shifts. However, 2 years ago, that hadn't happened yet. The distribution shift hadn't happened. But we're now 2 to 3 years later, and if you look at history, you tend to have the distribution shifts 2 to 3 years after a technology shift. And so that's getting to the channel box of the four fits. And I think we're at the beginning, the precipice of having a new dominant channel to tap into. My personal bet is on ChatGPT, but it's still an open question of who wins this. And the reason is as you can see here, ChatGPT is not just growing faster than all of the other major platforms, it's actually accelerating growth. And so they're going to basically surpass 1 billion MAUs by the end of this year, and that growth is continuing to accelerate. But the more important metrics are that if you look at history, the winners are never the ones that start off with the best distribution, it's the ones that start off with the best retention and engagement. And so this is data from DDoS, a VC, not an injury, so it's probably sacrilegious here, but you can see ChatGPT's retention curves are not only above all of the other players in their category. There's another chart that shows their retention cohorts shifting up over time and smiling. But the other component of this is that they also have the best engagement. And as we all know, retention is kind of the key of growth. It's going to continue to compound over and over and over again. And so we're kind of at the beginning of this next big distribution shift. And a lot of people are focusing on how this is going to change SEO. And there's kind of two narratives out there right now that I think are both wrong. The first is that this is just impacting kind of informational searches, but the data is actually showing that that's not true. It's actually impacting all different types of searches. But I think the bigger change that we'll probably see is, besides getting the new environment, the new channel, a new place for users are building habits and spending their time on search, we're probably also going to get some new type of app or development platform to tap into. And when you look at history, they all follow the same exact pattern. They create massive opportunities, but also massive casualties at the same time, because they go through this cycle. They identify the moat, they open up some kind of development platform in order to draw in more users, more habit, and then over time they eventually close it to monetize. That happened with the Facebook platform, it's happened with mobile over time, it's happened with search, happens on the smaller levels too on LinkedIn. Every single time it goes through this exact same cycle. And knowing this cycle, right, is how we try to figure out how do we extend our product strategies, how do we extend our current products to participate in these new environments. Because the biggest mistake on every piece of history and every time is the incumbents, the people who had products before, they try to copy and paste their product into the new environment versus figuring out how to extend it in a new way that people are behaving in these channels. It happened on Facebook. The web game developers copied and pasted their games into Facebook. Didn't work. The people who rebuilt it from scratch were the winners. Same thing happened with mobile. It happens every single time. And so there are new big opportunities emerging, but there's still a lot of questions and we'll take advantage of it. Okay, on the monetization box, common narrative. Costs are decreasing 10x. Or costs will decrease 10x. A lot of people, a lot of startups have taken bets on this, and it's not exactly playing out to be true. So yes, the cost of older models are decreasing rapidly, but this is from Ethan Ding, a founder of a company called TextQL, where he plotted out the cost of the latest model at any given point, and he kind of showed that it's essentially been flat. Now this decreased a little bit lately if we extended it out to GPT-5 because they're doing a lot of underneath the hood model switching. But if you look at the cost of the most part of a GPT-5, it's still kind of on this curve. And his whole point in this article that he had, which I recommend everybody reading, is that consumers, like, even though they don't understand the differences between these models, they do want the capabilities, they do expect the quality of the output of the latest model. It's not like, the analogy is like, it's not like everybody all of a sudden wants to buy a 1970 Toyota now that, the 2025 is out, even though the old one is cheaper. But the other dimension of this is actually tokens. So kind of going to a different view of that first chart I showed you is that as these models can do more and more capable things, we start to enable more and more complex use cases. Those more complex use cases consume more and more tokens. And so you end up with this equation of costs staying the same, but more and more tokens being consumed on every single use case. And that's starting to either stabilize costs a little or go costs up. Now, I'm sure there's going to be optimizations at some point around this, but they're not really happening at this exact moment in time. And of course, the other part of this equation is willingness to pay, right? So if we have seen rising costs, what happens to the willingness to pay of consumers? And it's interesting to see, like, in cursors and all the AI coding space. In Q1 2025, if you go back to all the Reddit and community comments, you see stuff like this. This is amazing. It built what would have taken me 2+ weeks and 2 prompts. They're blowing away. They're willing to almost pay anything. And now in Q3, 2 quarters later, most of the comments are dominated by this, right? I paid $20 for these credits and got ripped off, right? And so willingness to pay is not stable over time either. It has been massively shifting. And if you look at the categories that have taken off the fastest and have been around the longest, actually willingness to pay hasn't necessarily gone up. It's actually gone down in some cases. So there's some interesting dynamics here on that model and monetization box in the lower left-hand corner. And the whole point about this is that with the forfeits is like, if one of these boxes substantially changes, you typically have to change all of the rest or reconsider the rest, because this works as a system that fits. It's like a puzzle. And so if you change one of the puzzle pieces, then you have to change how it kind of fits with the rest. And I think pretty much all of us in this room, at least one of these boxes is going to substantially change, if not more. And so a lot of really big questions around how we deal with strategy. Okay, second part, tools. So I'm sure maybe everybody has seen this so far. This kind of came out a few weeks ago. MIT did a study that showed that tool adoption isn't necessarily what we think it is in a lot of companies that only 5% of pilots actually make it to production in the enterprise. And so, yes, we live in the kind of heart of Silicon Valley. Probably the most tech-forward companies we're all adopting at a fast pace. But I do think sometimes it's good to zoom out a little bit and kind of look at the rest of folks to see kind of what's happening, what are the problems. And it's not just large enterprises. That's kind of part of the narrative, is that these are just all large old school enterprises. And so Apollo Global Management has this bi-weekly survey of about 1 million companies. It's a really good sample size. And what they're actually showing is for smaller companies, less than 250, that has actually started to decrease as well. And this is a lagging metric. So every point on this curve is, I believe, an average of the previous 8 weeks. And so the latest points on this curve are actually lower than what they're showing. And so you start to see this shift of what's going on. And so the question is, all right, well, what are the reasons behind it? And there's been a bunch of studies being done on this, and it has nothing to do with cost ROI. It has everything to do with human adoption. The biggest, most painful point that you see on the bottom there is just unwillingness to adopt new tools from team members, something that we saw a lot in your surveys of like how to handle and how to deal with. And I think you're going to hear from a bunch of folks on how they've been handling that internally. Additionally, what we started to see in Reforge in a lot of our customers that are going through transformations is this big disconnect between what the leaders think are the problem and what the employees think the problems are as well. And it's just been interesting to see that reiterated in a bunch of studies and data. And so there's this big disconnect of people don't actually know what the underlying problem is. And when we typically look at things, we typically try to find 4 friction points. There's procurement, when defense controls offense. So these are real quotes from people we've talked to. It was like, I wanted to adopt a specific tool. It was going to cost $200 per year, but automate something that would take me $5 per week. It was going to be 2.5 months into going through legal security net. They just gave up. They literally just said that they gave up. The other one is political barriers. So I think everybody on product specifically is dealing with is like, we used to have non-developers and developers, and now with all these tools, it's kind of like this weird mishmash of like what we're able to do. And that's creating a bunch of political barriers. I talked to an employee, adopted an AI prototyping tool. This is one of those companies who's been out there saying, we're AI forward. They've got the executive decree. They said, they adopted it, they showed it to their team, and their team, the designers and stuff reacted so negatively, it went all the way up to the VPs, took a month all the way to get back down on permission of use. And there's just this huge kind of political nightmare around it. And so this stuff is happening on the front lines. Also permission barriers, like I don't know if I have permission to use this tool, so I'm just gonna go and wait. And finally knowledge barriers, which we deal with a lot of Reforge, a lot of bottoms up. I kind of expect my team to kind of learn this on their own. Newsletters, podcasts. The problem is like, they're your audience, your employees, we see every time is we got you leaders, right? They're the ones who are always going to take the initiative. You got your converts, the people who need more structure, more reward, more incentives in order to really make the transition. And this methodology just doesn't work. We need like more of a tops-down strategy. And so what we've been seeing inside companies is more of this. That have been doing it really well. I know David Wilkes from Shopify is going to present a little bit later, but we came up with this of like, you have to have 5 things to get behavior change to happen: constraints, ownership, directives, expectations, and rewards. All 5 need to be present to get those converts to actually change their behavior. And the thing that moves the needle the most are constraints. Right? Things like before requesting additional headcount or budget, you must demonstrate that AI can't accomplish the same result. Or process constraints, like I'm not going to look at anything unless you've done 3 prototypes. Those types of things like really going to push the needle. All right, team. What are some metrics we saw about this? One of the narratives right now is AI is replacing jobs, making teams smaller, right? There's actually data to show that that is maybe not actually true. Yes, the big companies have been kind of reducing headcount and doing some other like kind of more efficiency, kind of stabilizing. But this is a survey done by Mercury over 1,500 companies. This is from companies who said that they are adopting an AI tool like en masse inside their companies. So those are companies that are really embracing AI. You would expect these companies to maybe not be hiring as aggressively, not growing their teams. And the data actually shows the exact reverse, is that they are hiring aggressively and not in the areas that you would think. A lot about it was something like 45% of the hiring was happening in like customer service and some of these other places. that the narrative says it's going down. So there's a really interesting dynamic between the big and the small companies emerging. Another thing, AI is killing entry-level positions. Is that a problem? That's a problem, or is it? This is actually really true, that the entry-level jobs just came out about 3 or 4 months ago from Stanford, but the early careers you can see in the blue line specifically for software developers is just like absolutely tanking right now. But on the opposite end of the equation, 2 companies you'll see here today is I always look to, okay, well, what are the most forward-looking employers doing? Because that feels like the canary in the coal mine, the thing that people will eventually follow. And you'll see things like Shopify, right, saying like, actually, this is enabling us to hire way more interns, way more early career folks, and we're going to take a big bet on that. LinkedIn, you'll hear from Tomo today, the chief product officer at LinkedIn. They scrapped their APM program and now have an APB program, the Associate Product Builders program, that to attract young early professionals that are more versatile across design, engineering, and product versus these strict product functional roles. And so I do think people look at this, some look at this and be like, big problem. And then the big employers, a lot of the really frontier employers look at this and be like, oh, there's an opportunity here. And so there's both sides of the equation on this front. The last narrative on this is the roles of EPD are blurring. 100% agree with that. 41% of you said product is doing more design in my org. 31% said design is doing more engineering. A lot of the conversation is focused on how these 3 roles are blurring, which is true. But if you actually look over a lot of companies in history, we tend to start with these 3 roles in product. And as we grow inside an organization, we tend to surround this triad with a bunch of specialists. Product engineers, product researchers, product marketers. So the triad turns into this like weird octagon, and that's what creates a lot of the coordination costs. And I think what we're seeing in a lot of companies is that actually a lot of the responsibilities and tasks are kind of converging into the triad, rather than the triad like the PM, no PM roles or no design roles. Like there's all those kind of narratives. And I think the reason for this is if you look on a spectrum, we could plot every skill, every role, or every use case on the spectrum of, on the far left-hand side, the task is, this is from Daniel Pearson, very atomic, discrete, and you can verify the output, or it's very not discrete, non-verifiable, right? Everybody's heard like taste and judgment is the thing that's going to be durable, because that's on the far right hand of the spectrum. You can't really verify the output of taste. It's like kind of like a messy problem. And all these tasks live on the spectrum. So if the task is on the far left hand of the spectrum, it's like AI is automating that. And it's on the far right hand side, humans still doing that. And then there's all this stuff in the middle where AI augments. And this is where we see kind of the roles really starting to blur. It's like PMs that weren't able to do basic designs before can now do it with AI prototyping. They can't go all the way to the right hand of the spectrum, but the skills and the tasks that kind of sit in this middle, that thing where AI can augment and enable a really smart person to do that thing where they couldn't do before, that's the thing that's feeling like it's converging. And so you see this a lot in like user research. We see this a lot in our insights product, is that now a lot of product teams are able to do their own user research because AI is automating or augmenting 80% of that journey, meaning like bringing all the data together, synthesizing it, joining with other data, all that kind of stuff. And so when I think about like what is actually blurring, how is this going to converge, this is kind of like what's in my head of like what are the tasks that start to blend and converge. All right, last piece, and then I'm going to hand it off to Robbie, is another narrative, AI speeding up software development. It's interesting. It really depends on where you look. This was a study done by Meteor. These were specifically open source developers working on larger code bases, required a lot more context and other things. And the actual observed result is that they were 20% less efficient on it. And so you kind of see it in places where you're starting from scratch, in those types of places, yes, it is accelerating, but a lot of us are in much other bigger companies with a lot of other constraints and things built up over time, and it's not there yet. I think it certainly will be there over time, but there's this big dichotomy of depending on what you're working on, whether it's actually making you more efficient or not. Part of the efficiency problem, I think, is this, which is this is a graph of where AI and agentic coding and other kind of use cases or AI is being deployed, and by far it's coding assistance. a lot more than other parts of product and design. And part of this, and what the problem that this creates is that product is a system. We're not here to produce more code. We're here to produce and ship more product that our customers use. And doing that is a system between product design and engineering. And the key about a system is that a system is only as fast as its slowest bottleneck. So if you massively increase the efficiency of one part of the system, all you're going to do is shift the bottleneck to another part of the system. And that's exactly what people are observing. Andrew Neef, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, he gave this presentation at YC Startup School saying PMs are the new bottleneck because of that. Part of the solution was just like hire a lot more PMs, and I was like, oh, wait a second, that doesn't make sense. Even though that would be good for Reforge's market and TAM, it's just more of like, how do we think about these things as a system where we're deploying AI? Because these are a system, you've got to deploy it evenly across all parts of the system in order to really increase its efficiency. So look, old world. Product development, dozens of steps, multiple tools at each part of the step, specialists to run those tools, coordination and handoff between each one of those. This is, I think, going to look very, very different in a few years. I think we all are here because we think it's going to look very different. We're figuring out exactly what that picture is going to look like. Because look, AI native teams, we're all trying to get there. We need to build a different approach. This is going to be the biggest transformation I think any of us have seen in the past 25 years. I'm excited for it, 100%, but a lot of stuff to figure out as well. So today we're going to hear about these 4 parts from these amazing people around strategy, tools, process, and team. We're going to kick off with Ravi next, who's going to talk a little bit about building products competitors can't match. We're going to end the day with a great chat by Tomer Cohen, the Chief Product Officer at LinkedIn. Tons of interesting stuff in between on that. And don't forget, we have a happy hour at 4 p.m. It's 2 blocks away. We'll announce the location at the end of the day. It's also in the Notion doc that we sent you. Other than that, if you have any questions, please let us know. We hope you enjoy the day.